How you doing, guys? This is Tom Sheppard here at the Elite FTS compound. Once again, we got Naomi here, who's all-time world record holder. She is going to be helping us today go through a tutorial video on how to do a Pendlay row. So a Pendlay row is basically a strict bent over row done from the floor. It's not one that's used a lot by people, but it's a really great upper back builder, especially in terms of it carrying over to the bench press, as well as kind of whole body strength and tension. So the main differences that we're going to get here compared to like a regular bent over row done from the knee height is a postural strength. It can help strengthen the start of the deadlift because you have to hold essentially your deadlift start position whilst you're rowing a heavy weight. And then B, because of the more flared elbow position, it's going to be better for recruiting the traps, rhomboids, rear delts, and more of the upper back as opposed to the lats, which is what you get more from a bent over row. So when we're setting up for a Pendlay row, you're going to adopt basically a conventional deadlift start position. The only difference is going to be is that the bar is going to be over your toes. And basically what we're looking for is the bar to start underneath your scapula or underneath your armpit, whatever is easier to think about. So if we just look from the side right now, Naomi's going to have the bar over her toes. She's going to set her grip on the bar just wider than shoulder width. And then from here, she's going to drop her hips just enough so that we can get neutral. Arch up. So arch harder. There. So now the bar is still over the toe. The armpit's directly over the bar. We've got a neutral spine. We don't want to drop the hips any lower than that, because if we start dropping lower, drop lower for me, what happens is the knees now are in the way of the bar, and we haven't got a clear bar path up to row. So the knees, we basically need a vertical or almost vertical shin angle here, just enough so that we can get neutral through here and relax. Okay? So shins are vertical or just very, very slightly forward so that the bar has got enough space to come up to the lower rib cage. Now, exactly where you're going to pull to is going to depend a little bit on how wide you want to go with your grip and how long your arms are. But as a general rule of thumb, the lower part of your rib cage is going to be where you're pulling to, which is yet another reason why it can carry over well to your bench press, because in general, you're going to be rowing to a very similar position that you're touching the bar down on when you do a bench press, okay? So once we've set up with the bar over the toes, the hips just low enough to set a neutral spine, from this position, we're actually going to keep the elbows flared as opposed to screwing them back to get the lats in, because we don't want to pull up and back. We want to pull pretty much straight up. So the elbows are going to stay pointing to the side. We're going to get some retraction to pull the slack from the bar, and then we're going to pull straight up from there. Just take your time, but do a couple if you don't mind. That's it. Beautiful. And relax. Okay? So that's what your strict Pendlay row should look like. Now, from there, what you commonly see is people trying too much weight. And what will happen is they'll leverage themselves down to the bar as they lift. So we're just going to Naomi demonstrate what that looks like now. But what you should be doing is the whole time that you're pulling is rooting yourself into the floor and aiming to keep your entire body completely still, so that the only moving component is the shoulder and the arm. Whereas if we go too heavy, what we'll do is we'll try to leverage into the bar by pulling down the hip through the hamstring, and the knees will come forward. So if you can just show us that. Over your toes. And now pull, but cheat it basically by pulling your hips into it. Pull your hips down to the bar to cheat basically. Okay. And then eventually what we end up doing is basically getting what we call a cheated Pendlay row, which is a very good variation of a Pendlay row, but again, a different exercise. So if we want to do a Pendlay row that we specifically want to overload to put more weight through the upper back, we can purposely use a leg drive to get more weight on the bar, but there is a specific way that we should do that. So how that's going to be different to a strict Pendlay row is, Naomi's going to set up now closer to the bar so that we can get some knee bend and the bar is against the shin. And now what happens is, just like if she was doing a conventional deadlift, we're going to get an initial quad drive, which is going to push the knee back out of the way of the bar. And as soon as that knee is back and the shin is vertical, then she's going to pull through the arms to get it to her lower ribs. So the touch point is the same, but because of this initial quad drive, now the bar's got more momentum and we can get a higher load up to the ribs. So if you want to go for that for me. That's it. So before the bar gets to the knee joint, we are running out a leg drive, if you like, and then transitioning it to the row. But because of the momentum behind the bar, that we can get a greater load on there. Now, this is also a really good one if you want to do some kind of explosive pulling work with people, but they haven't got the mobility to do power cleans or power snatches, or you don't want to invest the time in learning those complicated lifts. This can be a really good lift to have them do in place of something like a power clean, as essentially like a whole body explosive pulling movement. Now, if you wanted to overload the back even more again, and this tends to carry over even better to the deadlift again, especially if you're someone who pulls with a rounded back or someone who gets rounded over at heavier loads, we can do what's called a deadlift row. Now, the reason that this is different is we're going to adopt the same setup, but we're actually going to leg drive for longer and pull as if we were basically up to the knee or just above the knee. And then we're going to make it more lat dominant by pulling back towards the hip joint. So it's essentially like doing a regular barbell bent over row, but we're doing a half deadlift at the start. So the bar's got momentum and then carrying that momentum through to pull to the hip. So because of the backward movement of the bar rather than straight up to the ribs, it's more lat dominant, but it does carry over better to the deadlift, and it does allow us to shift more weight. So Naomi's going to adopt the exact same position, but she's going to use her legs for longer now. And rather than pulling with the arms whilst the bar is below the knee joint, she's going to pull with the arms when it's above the knee joint, and now pull back as opposed to straight up. So when you're ready, that's it, really go for it, make it fast. So again, those are great for overloading the upper back if that's your weakness in the deadlift or even the squat. And it's even a good way for teaching people to be explosive out at the start of the deadlift and building a lot of upper back tension in the start of the deadlift. Because if you lose upper back tension during that first initial half of the pull, you're not in a position then when you can pull it back towards your hip. So those are 3 variations of a Pendlay row that have really good applications on the power lifts as well as for explosive strength. I hope you found that useful. Until next time.